It is the conference championship round. We're going to walk through each position. We're going to start with the quarterback position, but per usual, always want to remind you guys, if you want access to this data sheet and you have an Amazon Prime account, you get it for free. It's one of the best ways to kind of take advantage of what I'm trying to do here for free. You do have access to that free Twitch Prime subscription, so make sure you're taking advantage of that. This is something that's updated a couple times for subscribers in the Discord. So if you are a subscriber and you have seen this, but you aren't in the Discord, definitely doing yourself a disservice. A lot of really awesome conversation that's been going on there for a bunch of different sports. My boy Steve in the chat, always in the betting chat as well, throwing out his picks and whatnot. So we'll walk through quarterback first, guys. Obviously, just 2 games on this slate. We do have one quarterback that is extremely expensive, Patrick Mahomes. Shout out Patrick Mahomes, all those people that waited until game 3 with me last week. That was the play. 7,700, 9,500 on FanDuel. Does have pretty drastically higher ceiling than these other guys in terms of his projection on kind of the 90th to 95th percentile outcome or so, but it's probably to do with this decent team total they have against Tennessee. Is this the week where Tennessee gets in poor game script and then still continues to give the ball to Derrick Henry no matter what? I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. I do think that this is a 2-game slate in which I would prefer these games were flip-flopped a little bit. People just firing at this Green Bay, San Francisco a little bit more in game 1, which I would have hoped would have left a little bit of ownership for this Kansas City and Tennessee game. It does seem like it would be a little bit more fantasy friendly. It's kind of a weird spot for Tannehill in general. I actually have a little bit of interest here. We know in terms of the efficiency side of things, Tannehill just had an absolutely bonkers season this year. Kansas City is a team that has given up a little bit above average amount of rushing equity to rushing quarterbacks, so I do like that quite a bit. I will say that this price tag, I actually like the way they price it, though. These guys are significantly cheaper than Mahomes. So you actually, in terms of cash games, but also just in general on DK, it's a decent salary saving option if you did want to go to Tannehill or Jimmy G. I will say one thing, guys. I don't have a lot of interest in Aaron Rodgers. So that means that everyone should probably play him. I think he's the far and away 4th option this week. In terms of like when we've seen Rodgers struggle, it was against these defenses like San Francisco that don't necessarily bring a ton of heat. They have enough talent in the secondary to kind of sit back a little bit. Gave Rodgers fits a little bit earlier this year. And it's also a game where I think that Devontae Adams struggled a little bit as well. So if they were to take him away, I don't know what else is really there in terms of Rodgers hitting his ceiling in this spot. Plus, I guess don't really want to watch Green Bay in the Super Bowl. So I guess I'll be cheering against that a little bit. I will say that San Francisco has given up an above average amount as well in terms of what they've given to rushing quarterbacks this year. So it's an interesting spot. Obviously, really low total for Rodgers and the Packers on the road. So it's really interesting. I wouldn't expect them to be heavily owned or anything like that. But if I was to just look at these blindly, and sometimes I'll do this, honestly, I'll just delete the names no matter what position I'm looking at, and really just try and get a feel for what the pricing looks like in terms of the data and the pricing. I honestly wouldn't have had Rodgers the second highest price quarterback. I would have had him being the cheapest, but who knows? There's always going to be people that'll fire at Rodgers, some clear weapons, obviously, like Devontae Adams. Like, we'll see what happens with Lazard and whatnot. It's interesting. I'm not super. I think Green Bay is where I have the least amount of interest in terms of quarterback for sure. Someone in the chat was asking, what's up, Jay Dupe? How's it going, man? He was like, is there an edge in playing FanDuel and compared to DK? That's a Steve question. Steve got me playing more action on FanDuel about halfway through the year, and it was a good thing for me. I do think that the contests are a lot different on FanDuel. The prize pools can be a little bit smaller, and obviously what they've done over playoffs is their main slate was actually the 2-game slate the last 2 weeks. They had a Saturday and a Sunday. Now, obviously, we just have 2 games, so it doesn't matter. But you were able to find some smaller contests. I've been playing a 5 max contest over on FanDuel the last couple weeks. On DraftKings, it's more just pricing how many guys you want to play against. And one thing that Steve mentioned, too, that I think was really sharp was I was considering playing the Wildcat on DraftKings. Like, that's what I normally do during playoff weeks. But it's like an 80 max tournament. I almost never want to go into those situations where someone could potentially put 80 lineups in if I'm only going to put in like my normal 7 to 10 on playoff slates. So for me, it just made more sense to play on FanDuel in terms of the structures and in terms of some of the tournaments at the stakes I'm at. So I would say I'm almost always skewing towards smaller fields in general. But these are weeks where I'll take some shots on some of the larger field stuff and really just trying to make my way through in terms of late swap. Late swap's a little bit more difficult in a spot like this with just 2 games. But I do think a lot of the chalk is going to be in that first game. So in terms of the cheaper option, I'm actually kind of interested in Jimmy G in that second game. How do you guys feel about Jimmy G? He's 5,200. I think a lot of people are going to be kind of looking towards last week where, I mean, he ultimately didn't have a great game, but Minnesota just didn't put up much of a fight. If there's any sort of fight from Green Bay in this game, I would imagine that we could see a bounce back performance from some of these pass catchers. Like if people want to get off George Kittle because of what he did to them last week, if people don't want to play guys like Deebo Samuel, I might be willing to go back to that. I think that I'm definitely more interested in that. At 5,200 with this team total, I mean, over a 2K, like 2,500 difference in salary, Jimmy G versus Mahomes, like that. It's still quarterback when it comes down to it, guys. So I actually do have some interest in that. I still think that San Francisco, in theory, is still going to want to run the ball. We know that. But I do have some interest in this. I do think that this offensive line for San Francisco should be able to hold up relatively well against Green Bay. That was my big concern last week with Russell Wilson, is that they just weren't going to be able to protect very well. So I think it could be a decent bounce back spot for Jimmy G in general. In terms of play volume, slightly in favor of the first game, but in terms of teams and how many plays they'll be run, it does look like it will be Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs up top, but Jimmy G not too far behind with 63 plays in terms of their projections. So both are home favorites. I wouldn't be super shocked if it ended up being a Kansas City, San Francisco Super Bowl this year. We don't have Lamar Jackson. We don't have Josh Allen. We don't have shout out to those guys. Been a lot of fun to play them this year in terms of guys that are giving us a ton on the ground. Mahomes, Tannehill, they're not zeros. Rodgers, I don't know. That would be the knock against Jimmy G, is that his floor might be a little bit lower in terms of what he's going to give you. But I would argue that we have a really good idea of where the ball is going to go for Jimmy. There's always value in that. There's always value in that for sure. MPM Hammond, Jimmy G, Kittle Smash Week. What's up, man? How's it going? I might be with you on that. And I think Steve hit the nail on the head. Like the way for Jimmy G, Kittle, those guys to truly get there is for Green Bay to grab that lead. And I guess that's where my logic would hurt a little bit or would falter a little bit. Is just I don't know if Rodgers is going to have a ton of success in this spot. I'm very down on him overall this week, which again means you should just jam in as much Rodgers as possible, because I've definitely been off on Rodgers. I've definitely missed both of his or he had a couple really big weeks during the year, and I missed on those for sure. Anything else at quarterback, guys? I think it's an interesting one in terms of price. Mahomes is going to be the chalk in terms of the highest ceiling, highest equity play. Yeah, just play Mahomes. Not a big deal. Pretty nice total there, that at home. I can't really say a whole lot about it. I will say that Tennessee may beat in the short and the deep area of the field. They're probably the worst defense left. Is that a hot take? I do think that we can attack Kansas City with some weapons through the air in terms of some of the cheaper Tennessee guys, but that might transition us relatively well into the next spot. But before we do that, like I said, I wanted to get you guys a little bit more involved this stream since there's not as much to go through on the data sheet. Where are we at in terms of the top QB play? Place your vote in the chat. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Mahomes, Tannehill, Rodgers, or Jimmy G. We're taking price into consideration here, guys. And I'm talking mostly from a tournament perspective. But still, again, the type of tournaments that I play, they're mostly the smaller field stuff anyway. So like your top quarterback play, where are we at? Eric, I think that let's just say from like a raw points based on price, all of that, like the best play. If you're building an optimal lineup, who's the quarterback you like the most? We won't take into consideration fading ownership. That's just going to skew our results, I think. A lot of Tannehill people. Interesting. I might be team Jimmy G over Tannehill this week, but we'll see. I don't hate it. Tennessee is, I mean, you would think they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to throw a little more than they have the last couple of weeks, but I don't know. I get that wrong every week anyway. Not a lot of Rodgers love. You guys are with me on that? I wasn't really sure if that was going to be hot or not. San Francisco looked good. They look good. And I'm not a San Francisco fan. Like, the last thing I want is for a division rival, my Cardinals, to make the Super Bowl, but they look pretty solid. Let's get a few more votes here, and then we'll move on to running back. Interesting running back slate. Steve, the only Rodgers vote so far is from Steve. Hashtag Steve in the chat. What's the Rodgers argument then, Steve? Let's hear from it. What's up, Noob? How's it going, man? No worries. If you're late, this will be on YouTube. Never an issue. But if you're watching this on YouTube later, come hang out with us live. We do this every single week. First look on either a Tuesday or Wednesday. We've been doing it Wednesdays more for the playoff weeks. Make sure you're here for Pro Bowl next week. Pro Bowl is that slate. So much fun. So much fun. While Steve's probably typing something out about Rodgers right now, or he's at work, probably both. Let's move on to running back here. And I do think that running back is one that is thin, but definitely some options we got to talk about. All right. What are we doing with Derrick Henry? I have no idea. I will say that if you give the projection a little bit of a bump, which I did this week, honestly, it popped out a few less projected carries than I thought there would be. So I bumped it up a little bit manually. I don't know. This guy, haven't played him enough this year. I've played him like on some tournament teams the last couple weeks. One thing that I know Steve did as well this past week on FanDuel was have some Derrick Henry exposure on Lamar Jackson teams. Those teams didn't end up getting there just because obviously the Mahomes teams are what you needed to get to the top. But I do think that the thought process there was reasonable. The price tag, $8,700 for Henry, $98 on FanDuel. I mean, it's the same thing as every week. Not a great total. They're road underdogs, but he's not going to be that active in the passing game. He still could carry the ball 25 times, like 24, 25 times. I don't know. The one thing that I will say in favor of Derrick Henry is the last 2 weeks, he's had good matchups on the ground. He's taken advantage of it. Like, so if there's a team that is going to identify a weakness, so the Patriots, you can run on the Patriots. Like, even last week, the Ravens, you can run on the Ravens. And they've taken advantage of it. They're not scared to give this guy the ball and just let him ride. So Kansas City, 29th in terms of defending running backs, 20th running backs on the passing game. I don't know. Total yards over the last 4 games. I actually bumped this to the last 5 since there's been some buys in there, and I wanted to get kind of a cleaner picture of it. 148.5 total yards over the last 4 games, and let's keep in mind, he's not someone that's really active in the passing game, so like, it's just a crazy amount of efficiency from Derrick Henry. I've been fading it most of the season at these price tags, and he just kind of, I've been having a lighter share recently just because the running back player pool hasn't been fantastic overall. But still, definitely feel like I haven't done well on this whole Henry analysis. So I do think the ceiling's there for sure. Last week was fortunate enough just to go 100% Damian Williams at that price. I thought he was pretty much a lock. Gavin says, is this the week? What's up, Gavin? Is this the week we finally fade Henry? Hasn't worked out well for us in the past. Yeah, I think that's, I think it's in quotes. That's exactly what I said last week. Definitely has not worked out well for us. And then last week, all those people that are just jumping on the Henry train, they get a passing touchdown. Why not? Let's get another passing touchdown for all the Derrick Henry people this week. That would be great. Pay down a Jimmy, pay up for Henry. Maybe. I think that's going to be a popular construction, MP. Small slates just like to trust the best players. Am I really going to roster Jimmy G or Tannehill when pricing is so close? That's fair. It's fair, Steve. Incredibly easy to stack. I do like that about Rodgers for sure. I just don't think they're going to have a ton of success against San Francisco, man. I don't know if I want to wait until game 2 just to like have Rodgers. I don't know. That's my initial feel on it. So Doozy thinks we finally have to play Derrick Henry. We finally got there, man. Volume and matchup. I'm with you. He goes, dud confirmed incoming. Could be, man. If I end up playing him this week and he just gets like that 80-yard game, 0 catches, no touchdowns, that's going to be really sad. My rabid Derrick Henry hate is such a leak in my game. Dude, I am right there with you, Gavin. It has been not great. There's like a few spots in DFS. Everyone has them. And Chris Hansen, by the way, or Scott Hansen. I always call him Chris for some reason. Scott Hansen. He's over at Roto Grinders, but I met him at the live final this year, the DraftKings live final, and he said that he thinks that that's kind of a leak of my game, that I guess X these guys out completely, that don't catch balls, because there is ceiling involved in still these guys, and he's probably right. I mean, maybe need to take a deeper look into that next year. He's playing a lot of larger field stuff, I would imagine. I'm playing mostly smaller field, so that's probably just a difference in contest selection for the two of us. Very good player. I believe he's got 2 live final victories, so that's 2 more than I have. So brutal watching him with. Yeah, it's brutal watching games. For the record, Derrick Henry is a fun guy to watch if you like enjoy watching football. It's not that I hate Derrick Henry. I don't like I talked about it with quarterback. If I just X'd out all of these names, maybe this slate is a bad example, but I tend to avoid these guys that just aren't active up there and they're priced up here. I don't know. This is like Christian McCaffrey, like almost level pricing, like parts of the year this year. It's hard, but context of the slate is different. I realize that. In terms of the past the Derrick Henry discussion, I think Damien's still cheap. Are you guys with me on that? All these people that were saying that maybe that they were resting McCoy to get McCoy more involved, I don't think so. I think they were just resting Damian Williams so they could just continue to feed this guy. I mean, best team total. He is very active in the passing game. We talked about it last week as well. Can you play Damian Williams with Mahomes? Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The total's great. He's going to be active. Tennessee's a team that they've been basically middle of the pack in terms of running backs and their defense on the ground, but through the air, they've been below average. So I do think this is a great spot again for Damian. I thought they would get more aggressive with this price tag, 7K. I'd be prioritizing that. I do prefer Damian Williams to Aaron Jones at a very similar price tag. I don't think that's going to be a unique take. So maybe Aaron Jones is a leverage spot. I don't know. I just, again, like we've had a couple of weeks this year where it's like tighter decisions. I'm just always going to play the guy at home, bigger team total, favorite, active in the passing game, better quarterback. So I would imagine there's going to be situations where there's just going to be more touchdown opportunities as well. We've seen that with Damian at a time. UNC, what's up, man? I think I've finally got it, man. I finally got the UNC in my brain and not the UNC. Maybe we bring back UNC for next year, though, if I forget. Damian lock button was excellent. Tilted that we didn't get 26 receiving yards on 7 targets. Yeah, the yardage wasn't there, but I still think that Damian on last week was absolute lock. Chiefs should be up 21 last time they played. Yes, I mean, game script was fantastic, right? For all the Mahomes people, even all the Damian people in theory, like 7 targets. Like, I still think that he's going to get there during this game as well. I think either way, if it's on the ground, through the air, Damian at 7K is a guy that, I mean, it gets ugly fast, right? Gets really ugly very fast. So in terms of Aaron Jones, I was a little bit, I mean, I ended up with a ton of Aaron Jones last week anyways, as kind of a bit of a hammer that was reasonable. I will say that I wasn't really that worried about Jamal Williams last week. It turned out that was the case. He didn't end up playing a ton. Still been projected for about 6 touches, which is not much. His price has gone down. I don't think there's really a ton of running back plays overall in this slate again. So for me, I'm just going to be focusing on trying to decide my roster construction with these top 3 guys. I'm not going to be doing the whole San Francisco roulette at running back. I haven't played these guys all year. If you think that you know the guy that's going to get all the touches, best of luck. I'm not smart enough to figure out if it's going to be Coleman, Mostert. Maybe this is the Breida game. I have no idea. Kyle Juszczyk could score. That'd be great. So I don't really mess around with these situations where I truly don't know what the coach is thinking. It's not that I don't think the running game is going to be successful. I do. Shanahan, say what you want about some of these other coaches. Like, this guy's a stud when it comes to getting the most out of his players, and that actual football scheme for DFS is just an absolute nightmare. So yeah, maybe Mostert, and the argument in favor of Mostert, if you had to choose one guy, is sure, Coleman gets there last week, all of that, that's fine. He was like sick for part of this game, so he came out, all of that. The coaches have say they like to get Coleman involved early in games because he's a physical runner. I don't know. It sounds like a lot of stuff that just like makes me not want to play them in DFS. They're cheap. We're going to have to make concessions somewhere. If we want to play guys like Kelsey, Kittle, these wide receivers that we have, if we want to play Mahomes, there's going to have to be some things that we have to do here. I'm going to actively try and not go there. That's at least my initial plan. What do we think about Dion Lewis? Is this the Dion Lewis unleashed spot? I don't know. I'm a Dion Lewis fan. It's just I don't think they're going to get away from Derrick Henry even if they're way down in this game. They haven't done it yet. think San Francisco running back and wide receiver committees are one of the few areas to get unique this week, as much as it's brutal to predict. That's fair. I mean, yeah, it's a 2-game slate, man. If you happen to hit on the San Francisco guy, like if you're rolling out a lot of teams, oh yeah, like I mean, maybe you just spread those guys out. I was in favor of that last week, to be fair. We talked about that, I believe, on Saturday. Like if you're running out a ton of lineups, spreading in some Breda, spreading in some Coleman. So if you did that, and maybe you probably passed a lot of those Dalvin Cook type of scenarios, all those Dalvin Cook builds, especially if you're building as the slate goes on. You knew you were way ahead if you had some Coleman shares. So I get it from that perspective, for sure. I'd play San Francisco running backs before Lewis. I think that's fair, Vortex. I think that's fair. Green Bay and Tennessee, target workload highly concentrated. That's true. That's true. I really don't think there's a ton more at running back here, guys. McCoy, I have him at 2 touches right now. Like if he ends up getting there, that's fine. I think that it's priced pretty accurately, honestly, where it should be. Maybe Derrick Henry's a tad expensive, but you're paying for that ceiling, I think. All right, guys, wide receiver. This is one of those positions that last week it was, if you picked right with Devontae Adams and Tyreke Hill, congrats. I will say that this week is somewhat similar. I do think that at the top, those are the 2 top options. I'm not scared to go back to Tyreke Hill, guys. Maybe it's been a situation where last week we saw the floor. The fact that they scored 51 points or whatever it was, and Tyreke Hill had like 3 catches, I don't know. I don't see that happening again if they score another 30 to 40. So I'm back in on Tyreke. I mentioned my concerns with Green Bay overall in this spot. If people, like, it's recency bias, right? So we're trying to beat others. So what are other people thinking from last week? Oh, I played Devontae Adams over Tyreke Hill last week, and it worked out perfectly. I'm just going to do it again. I'm not saying I think Tyreke is going to be drastically lower owned. I definitely don't think that. But if there's going to be enough people on Devontae Adams that just refuse to play Tyreke Hill, I'm probably going to be on the Tyreke side of that one. Gavin says, if I see one single Corey Davis comment, I'm going to call you my buddy and call me to put a hit on you. Corey Davis only catches touchdown passes from Derrick Henry. How's that, Gavin? So 5,200. There's a couple guys, right? So AJ Brown, I do think that AJ Brown stands out from a price perspective. If there was a spot for AJ Brown to get back on track, I think this one makes some sense. I like AJ Brown a lot. I do. We've seen the talent from this guy. They've been getting like Khalif Raymond's the one that scored the touchdown last week. Like exactly how I feel about Khalif Raymond. He breaks my spreadsheet because I have to go back in and fix his price or something. Like it's like these random players that break my model, basically. So yeah, no, I'm not going back to the Khalif Raymond. I do think that AJ Brown now at 5,200, I can embrace that volatility a little bit. I can embrace that target share. Yeah, if they're going to run all game, fine. I do think that this is a spot where, wide receivers, it's not a fantastic matchup against Kansas City, but this is a guy that we've seen the ceiling. That's a great price for that ceiling for sure. Not scared to go back to Debo in the same range. I mentioned that. I think Jimmy G stacks, there's a lot of value, and if they do have to throw a little bit more this week, Debo, Sanders, Kittle, all the same reasons we liked them last week. There's really not a ton of reasons to just like Green Bay versus the Vikings defense. Sure, I still think that Debo is a guy that they're going to scheme to get the ball. They just didn't need to last week. So like it's similar, right? In terms of like his ceiling, this is just a really cheap price tag for both of these guys. So like Tyreke Hill, AJ Brown, Debo, both of those guys will be big time priorities for me. Who we got? Osimo had Khalif Raymond on a few teams. Are you kidding? That's sick, man. That is very, very sick. Hill killed me last week. Yeah, a lot of people, man. A lot of people. That's why you play him this week. You want to take advantage of all those people that refuse to. Like, I'm not kidding. So, like, I do a lot of one-on-one stuff, right, when I'm not doing content. I have clients that, like, I say a name. Nope, can't play him. Before I say a word about the spot, anything. Nope, I just can't play that guy. Like, talking about, like, these Corey Davis guys, like, after they get burned by someone like Tyreke, I hear it all the time, and it's what people think about on these type of slates. So, in terms of this top tier, I do think that it is pretty strong overall. Those would be the top guys that I'd be considering. I do think moving down, like, we need value. We do. We really need value. I have some interest in Tajay Sharp at 3,100. He's someone that I still think that his target share has been reasonable enough. Not a high upside guy by any means, but I think this has all the shapings of being a really low scoring slate anyway. So I'm not scared to punt with a guy like Tajay Sharp at the really cheap end of things. Anyone want to go back to the Sammy Watkins well? I think his price is still fine. 4,600. Nice total. Like, I mean, you basically you saw what he was last week. He's just, the upside just isn't, maybe he's just not very good. Like, can we just say that he's like the highest paid guy on this offense outside of I believe, I don't know what Mahomes' deal is. I would assume that Sammy Watkins in terms of the wide receivers, and he's just insanely overpaid. He's going to be involved. He's going to see targets, 4,600. Okay. I would rather find a way to A.J. Brown and Debo at that point. And I was I played Sammy Watkins on a lot of teams last week because he made builds work. This week, I think moving down to like this Sharp Davis range, but honestly, like just prioritizing the mid-range, I think the mid-range is actually surprisingly strong. Corey Davis doesn't have a 17-point ceiling. If it was a 17-point perceptions, I don't know. So the math would tell you that he's still a reasonable value at 4K. I will say that. McCole Hardman, sure. If you're trying to just grab a guy that can make a huge play for you at a really cheap price tag, sure. But it's not like he's going to be unowned. He just doesn't see any volume. So if you want to go McCole Hardman, KC defense, double dip, I think that's reasonable. What about Humphries if he plays? Maybe. I think that hurts Tajay Sharp for sure. I'm not really too worried about that as of now. So if anyone's watching this later and we do have news, we might have to discuss that one in the Discord. So I honestly think the big decision here is Tyreke versus Adams again. You guys with me on that? I think I'm on the Tyreke side again. We'll see. I think people that go early with Tyreke, it might like there's going to be guys every slate. It's a 2-game slate. If a guy has a slate breaking score, he's a guy you have to have we've seen it every time. I don't think he's going to be low owned though, Gavin. I really don't. Look at the team totals. Yeah, that's got to be the tiebreaker, right? We know it's very, very important at almost any position, right? Like the one thing that we can count on is that Vegas has a lot of incentive to make these lines sharp. And just some of the longer term data will show you that value just absolutely plummets at lower than 22 implied points. So tight end, this one will be quick. Kelsey, Kittle. I don't really want to play any of these other guys, if I'm being honest. Someone in the chat's talking about Anthony Fursker, maybe. I don't think there's much of a ceiling here from Johnny or Graham. I think that everyone that played these two tight end lineups last week, they're going to have a hard time clicking that again. I like both options, honestly. Like I think that 5,800 on DK for Kittle, I don't think this price discrepancy should be that far. So I might end up with a lot of Kittle again. Decent total at home. You guys don't need me. I mean, there's a reason everything's green up here, guys. Good, reasonable matchup for both. Everyone chasing those 3 touchdowns for Kelsey, fine. He's still going to be involved. Like, I mean, I have no issues with Kelsey whatsoever either. This price is really bad. Especially on FanDuel. Yeah, I'm with you, Steve. I think playing both, again, completely in play. So Steve mentioned Blake Bell. Had to hold an L, actually. One of my clients brought him up in terms of Showdown, and I think he was like 200 on Showdown, so maybe he was in play there. I ended up throwing out one Blake Bell team on, I think, the 2-game slate last week just as a complete leverage play off of Kelsey. He gets in there when Kelsey's banged up for a couple snap scores. So, yeah, Blake Bell at the absolute stone, man. Or I guess he's 2,800 now after scoring. Reasonable pivot. I honestly, it sounds crazy, but I might prefer going the Blake Bell route just to leverage the field on Kelsey than just messing around in this mid-range. I guess I'm not a big fan of the mid-range in here. So, Stone Cold Steve Austin Selly was incredible. Yeah, what a stud. So I think tight end's pretty simple, guys. I think that like the tiebreaker now is just that Kittle is too cheap for me. I think like the ceilings have to be at least close, point per dollar, like pretty easily Kittle, I think. Pretty simple. So let's move on to defense. This is another one I think we can work through relatively quickly, and then we'll take some questions. So in terms of these smaller slates, right? Sometimes it is just play the cheapest guy if it gets you to some of the studs. I don't know if I haven't been on board with Tennessee defense yet. They don't pressure enough for me. They've been getting there. So that hasn't been very fun, but I don't think I'm attacking them against Patrick Mahomes. I also wasn't, for the record, attacking them against Lamar Jackson. The one thing you can say is there's going to be pass attempts on the Mahomes side, so that's always good for a defense. I'm not necessarily on this, but 2K, if that gets you to the optimal team, I think that defense, it's possible. Defense doesn't matter a ton. There's just so much volatility there. But the thing is, there really isn't a really expensive defense on the slate anyways. So I mentioned that Rodgers tends to really struggle against these type of defenses like San Francisco. So I'll be all over San Francisco defense at 2,900. I think they're a fantastic value. Home favorite. They don't pressure a ton, like I mentioned, and that's not really my brand in terms of targeting defenses. But I do think that in this specific spot, it makes some sense to have some San Francisco exposure at that price. Rodgers is also someone that'll throw the ball away more than almost any quarterback in the league, so you got to be willing to kind of watch that happen, but I think that happens more when he's under pressure anyway. So in terms of looking past that a little bit, I want to like Green Bay defense more than I do. My problems with it is I think that the San Francisco offensive line is reasonable. Jimmy G, I mean, above average amount of sacks and interceptions, I get that. Pretty significant underdog on the road. They do pressure though. So if Jimmy G is going to have a rough day, it's going to be because Green Bay got there, right? So like last week we watched Russell Wilson just run for his life and just evade these sacks somehow because he's Russell Wilson. I don't think Jimmy G is really going to be able to do that. So I think to 2,400, I would prefer Green Bay to Tennessee. On the other side of this, I think that Kansas City defense is an awesome leverage play off of Mahomes' team. So in terms of the way they pressure, they're pressuring more towards the end of the season than they were the entire season. Again, home favorite against Ryan Tannehill, who will take sacks, but the pass attempts are the issue with Kansas City. At 32.8 pass attempts is where I have Ryan Tannehill projected right now. Just not a lot of volume for a defense to get there through the air. So I guess if I was to rank these in order of the defenses that I would be interested in taking in consideration price, I think it's San Francisco as my number one. I think I could probably get on board with Kansas City just because of the home favorite thing and Tannehill will take sacks, but I don't love it. And then it's Green Bay, then Tennessee. I think that that's the pretty clear order. I don't know if that's going to be really unique. So in terms of ownership, I would imagine that San Francisco and Kansas City will both draw a ton. So maybe on teams that are dead after the first game, maybe you just end up moving some of that San Francisco exposure to Green Bay. I think that would be how I would approach it. Jimmy G, 10 fumbles this season. Tannehill, 8. That's true. I like that. That's a good stat. Just got signed up. May have mentioned already, but is this a 2 tight end slate? Oh yeah. Not scared to go back to the Kelsey Kittle in the same lineup train. That's for sure. You want to learn more about how to be a profitable DraftKings and FanDuel player? Start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. If you can't wait until the next live stream on Twitch, make sure you come hang out with us in the Discord. Link in the description. I'll see you guys there.